Oh god, another clickbait YouTuber. Actually, no. While the Model O Wireless is a very good wireless gaming mouse, there is one objectively major problem. Before we talk about that though, let's talk about the good stuff. There are a lot of them. The Model O Wireless is Glorious's attempt to take on the big boys from Logitech with their G Pro X Superlight and Razer with their Viper Ultimate. And man, does it perform. Despite this mouse being relatively cheap at $80, about half the price of Logitech's and Razer's offering, if you get the Razer with the charging dock, performance between all these three mice feel indistinguishable from one another. The Model O uses Glorious's BAMF sensor, and just like the Logitech and the Razer, there's no perceptible smoothing or acceleration. In fact, they all felt the same in terms of precision, so no matter what you play or what you do, you'll know exactly where your crosshair or mouse is going to end up. This is helped by the 100% pure PTFE feet on the bottom of the mouse. Now this doesn't look like a lot of PTFE surface area, and while usually I'd agree that more is better, I think this amount of PTFE surface area is fine because when I used my G Pro X and used the PTFE puck rather than the plastic one, it ended up adding drag. So this is fine, and it glides very smooth on almost any surface anyway, so I have no complaints there. In terms of the build and design, that's where Glorious takes on a different approach to its competition. Unlike the G Pro X and the Viper Ultimate, the Model O Wireless has honeycomb holes all over it. This is the same shell used in the wired Model O. You could say that it's a Model O, but wireless. Mind blown. Because it has more holes than I have neurons, this mouse is very light at 69 grams. Nice. This makes it lighter than the Razer Viper Ultimate, which weighs 74 grams, but it's not as light as the G Pro X Superlight, which weighs 63 grams. And let me tell you, even though this barely weighs more than the Superlight on paper, the Superlight feels considerably lighter in the hand. Just like your wallet if you decide that 6 less grams is worth twice the price. Now I know some people aren't fans of mice with holes, and I never thought I'd like a mouse with holes myself, but then I started using one and then I realized it doesn't bother me that much. With that said, I do still prefer a mouse without holes because it just feels better in my palm. Just like the G Pro X, the Model O Wireless has a symmetrical shape, but it's technically a right-handed mouse because it only has left side buttons. And also like the G Pro X, because the shape is symmetrical and it doesn't slope on one side, you can still use it if you're a lefty. Just unbind the left side buttons and you won't even notice they're there if your pinky rests as low as mine does. This is a non-issue for the Razer because it has side buttons on both sides, making it ambidextrous. But what's it like using the Model O Wireless? Well, if you've used the wired Model O, then you already know. It's basically the same thing, but without the hassle of dealing with a cable. If you're not familiar with the Model O shape, the shape is a one-size-fits-most design, and I think the majority of people that try this mouse out will feel pretty comfortable with it. These are the dimensions of my hand and the mouse. I can easily and comfortably hold it with a palm or claw grip, but I can't do a fingertip grip at all with either the Model O, G Pro X, or Viper Ultimate because my hands just aren't big enough for mice this long. I only like fingertip gripping with short mice. You may be different though. In terms of the buttons, they all feel and sound very satisfying and high quality. The left click button requires about 70 grams of force, which is actually quite a lot compared to the G Pro X and Viper Ultimate. On the flip side, it has much better left and right mouse buttons compared to my Viper Ultimate. For some reason, my Viper makes this creaking sound when I force either the left or right click button towards the center of the mouse, which happens in a lot of tense gaming scenarios. It sounds and feels like it's rubbing against plastic and makes it harder to click. It's not like super hard to click, but it's definitely harder than it should be. And for the price that I paid for it, it shouldn't have this problem. In terms of the Logitech, it's perfectly fine. And in case anyone's wondering, I've never had any double click issues with my Viper Ultimate, G Pro Wireless, G Pro X, or this. Yet. In terms of battery life, it's okay. According to Glorious, with the RGB turned off, which is all I ever do with battery-powered mice, it has the longest lasting battery life of any mouse in its class with 71 hours of battery life. And while that might be true, it's hard to tell because the power draw on idle is horrendous. I don't remember what it's like with my Razer because I haven't used it in a while, but with either the G Pro X or the regular G Pro Wireless, I found myself having to charge those mice much less because those mice sip power on idle, whereas the Model O chugs it in comparison. It could be that Glorious was a bit optimistic on how long their battery lasts on a charge, but I haven't done any testing to get any actual data. All I know is that the battery on this is meh and that the G Pros are better. When it comes to charging it, the Model O one-ups the G Pros because it has a USB-C port rather than micro USB. Funny how Glorious did that at half the price. Now that you know everything you need to know, and it all sounds good, you should just go right ahead and buy this mouse, right? No. I just can't recommend this mouse for any competitive gamer or any general use because of how frustrating it is. Remember the title? Yeah, there's a couple issues, one of them being major. We'll start with the software. It's called Glorious Core and it looks like your standard peripheral software. You have a home button to see your connected Glorious products, a back button, and an area under the back button to click on whatever Glorious product you want to adjust whatever settings you want to adjust. You have your typical lighting settings, which lets you change your RGB to whatever you like, key binding to remap the buttons, and performance to adjust your liftoff distance, debounce time, polling rate, and DPI, which ranges from 100 to 19,000. Sounds all standard, right? So then what's the issue with the software? Let's start with the application shortcut. You know how you can delete pretty much any icon off the desktop and you can still find it in the Windows search menu? Can't do that here. If you delete the shortcut, you can't search for it on the Windows search menu anymore, which means that if the application isn't open, you just have to find the folder it's in just to open it. This is annoying because I'd like to have the least amount of icons in my desktop. Luckily, I won't be using this mouse after this review, which means I can delete it, but we'll get to that in less than 30 seconds. Number 2, this is a small one. Whenever you launch the application, it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds for the software to find your products. Do I sound a bit nitpicky? Sure, but I haven't had this happen with any other software for any other company or mouse or whatever, so this should be better. And number 3, every time I open the software, it says there's a firmware update for my mouse. I do what it says and plug the dongle in and my mouse with the included USB cable, and every time I try to update it, it fails. But these software issues are nothing compared to the connection issues this mouse has. It communicates via a 2.4 GHz dongle, which is what you want, except not here. The issue is that it stutters, jumps, lags, whatever you want to call it. It happens seemingly at random when I'm playing a game or just using my PC for general use, and the signal gets even worse if I decide to transfer files from an SD card to my PC or vice versa. And I don't know if you know this, but I transfer a lot of files. Kinda comes with the whole YouTube thing. Right now I have to place my dongle in this USB hub. If I place it on the motherboard behind my PC, reception is horrible because it's being blocked by my metal case. I tried every USB port and all of them do the same thing. I even reached out to Glorious to RMA the mouse, which by the way, that was a flawless process. But even after getting the new mouse, I still had the exact same problems which were replicated exactly the same way. And it seems I'm not alone. I asked you guys if you had issues with your Model O wireless, and almost half of you voted yes. That's a lot of yeses for 425 of you that voted yes or no. It's not in just my poll either. You'll find no shortage of complaints about the same issue on all kinds of forums. And Glorious knows about this because if you go to their FAQs for this mouse, they give you a couple of options to try to remedy the issue, with one of the options telling you to lower your polling rate from 1000 Hz to 500 Hz. Now that didn't work, but if it did, you're telling me that I should keep it at 500 Hz the entire time, have its maximum polling rate? No hecking way, unacceptable. The weird thing is that it's hard to tell who will be affected by this. When I first ran the poll, I thought that it would be tied to this whole AMD USB connection issue thing. After updating my BIOS to find the latest version, I still had issues. On top of that, there are plenty of other Ryzen 5000 series owners that have no connection issues, including my friend Kyle over at Too Much Tech, so I'm not really sure what to make of all this. It could be the PC, it could be the mouse, no one really seems to be sure. Hell, you might be totally fine, and if you're able to take advantage of a return policy for this mouse, then take advantage of it because it's still a really good mouse, especially for the price. But because there is a not so insignificant amount of people having the same issue, the Glorious Model O Wireless is a mouse I want to recommend, but can't.